Well, in other news that is good when it comes to the American people, the economy, Trump put a cap on credit cards. And as of today, credit card stock fall because of Trump's interest rate cap proposal. So shares of credit card companies fell on January 12th amid President Donald Trump's proposal to cap interest rates. Capital One declined 6%, American Express dropped 4%, Visa and MasterCard fell about 2%. Big banks slipped. Bank of America, Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo slid 4%. Buy now, pay later stocks like Affirm and Klarna, they slipped 4 to 2%. In a January 9th Truth Social post, the president proposed a 1-year cap on interest rates effective January 20th, reviving a 2024 election campaign idea. Please be informed. Here we go, right here. Please be informed that we no longer let American public be ripped off by credit card companies that are charging interest rates of 20 and 30%, and even more, which festered unimpeded during the Sleepy Joe administration. Affordability. Effective January 20th, 2026, I, as President of the United States, am calling for a 1-year cap on credit card interest rates of 10%. Coincidentally, the January 20th date will coincide with the 1-year anniversary of the historic and very successful Trump administration. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Make America great again, President Donald J. Trump. But this is just for 1 year.
Amen. They need to do something about bringing them in. Capital One is the biggest ripoff. They lure people in, and then somebody's 1 day late getting in a payment, and then they ramp everything up with the interest rates getting ridiculous up to 21%. Wells Fargo, I can personally witness all of the apologies that I've gotten from Wells Fargo because of internal crookedness, either from executives trying to get bonuses and ripping off the customers, or allowing their system to be infiltrated by hackers and using their official internal lines. Or in Bank of America has its skeletons as well. So all of them have problems. So yeah, reel them in.
Right. Now it says today's average interest rate for a new credit card is almost 24%. Trump stopped short of determining whether to use an executive order or rely on Congress to pass legislation. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One on January 11th, the president said if banks do not limit their interest rates, they will be in violation of the law.
Yes, 24%. And how many people pay anything with cash these days?
Right. So they've
got a complete lock on the American consumer because everybody uses cards. If it's not a preloaded card, which they get a piece of the action of, it's not a bank or an ATM card, which they control. It is a credit card. Nobody pays cash. You go in business after business, and they won't even take cash. And then on top of it, one of the reasons they don't want to take cash is because these jackasses haven't controlled crime in the streets. They'd rather have death and theft on the city streets than admit that they screwed up. And so now we're stuck. So why in the devil are you going to allow somebody to get an average of 24% interest on what has become a fundamental aspect of the American economy? In other words, that reduces the dollar bill you used to be able to spend from $1, 100 pennies, down to what? 76 pennies instead of 100?
Right. And so
1 quarter and 1 penny instead of $1, 3 quarters and 1 penny instead of $1 bill.
And so the rip-off Ponzi scheme of these high interest rates, a lot of these banking and credit card execs, these interest rates go to their bonuses.
Yeah, and then they want to have a nice fancy building.
Right. Or yacht. They buy yachts.
Celebrate. Oh, we got ripped off. This thing is 100 years old now. We need to go back in and revise it.
Right. And so Trump is on a roll.
And we might make it a constitutional amendment that before somebody in Congress can get in a position on a committee dealing with finance or law or something. They have a demonstrable background in the subject instead of just getting put on and don't know crap about it.
Well, what he's also doing is he says here, mortgage rates are now 5.7%. Mortgage costs were huge under Biden, which they were around 8%. That's why almost no young families could afford a home. With my focus on housing affordability, and after I authorized Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to invest their cash and buy $200 billion in mortgage bonds, mortgage rates moved down to 5.7%. This is great news for American families and real cost relief. We are bringing housing costs down and putting Americans first.
Amen. Thank you.
And something else that he's doing.
Thing was, you see, the way it went under the Democratic Party, let these guys get away with whatever they wanted to financially, so long as they fundraised and backed up this trannies in sports and sick boys and blue bras and blue panties competing with the girls and having an internal debate on how much hair a male can have on his face and still piss in the girl's bathroom. That's fundamentally what's going on here.
This was big too. Trump says U.S. to ban large investors from buying homes. President Trump says he's immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single family homes. People live in homes, not corporations. President Trump said the U.S. should bar large institutional investors from buying single family homes, arguing that corporate ownership has helped push housing further out of reach for everyday Americans. That is so true. When you talk about BlackRock with these subsidiaries owned by BlackRock, they're going around buying up single family homes, telling people, remember I was telling you my father, he would get
That's Halliburton, by the way.
Well, 1 second, because remember I told you my father was getting letters, or we'll buy your home for cash, give you $100,000 outright. And what they do, they buy up these single homes, rent them out, and hike up the cost of rent. So it could be a whole community, a whole neighborhood, and it's owned by corporations. So he says for a very long time, buying and owning a home was considered the pinnacle of the American dream. It was a reward for working hard and doing the right thing. But now, because of record high inflation caused by Joe Biden and Democrats in Congress, the American dream is increasingly out of reach for far too many people, especially younger Americans. So, yeah.
That Bush Bamian was to be the hoe after she left Joe. They were all going to get in on that. That's part of Halliburton's investment scheme. Now, here's the other thing too. See, what is the fundamental purpose of the government, of the tribe, whatever, of the Confederacy, whatever? There are three things: food, clothing, and shelter. And see, if you let these people take advantage of the system and the financial circumstances that this Fed is responsible for setting up, and impugn the ability of the average citizen to get shelter, even if you feed him, even if you clothe him, I guess he can go get a bunch of Nike tennis shoes or something, and Nike sweats or whatever the devil, workout pants and jacket. Where's he going to live? So you have to maintain some control over the ability of your public to shelter itself.
Right. Let me play this clip real quick.
Stocks of the institutional owners of single-family rental homes have just been taking a huge hit because President Trump just posted on social media that record high inflation has pushed Americans out of the dream of home ownership, especially younger Americans. And he said, it is for that reason and much more that I am immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single family homes. And I will be calling on Congress to codify it. People live in homes, not corporations. I will discuss this topic, including further housing and affordability proposals and more, at my speech in Davos in 2 weeks. Now, the key in that statement is that he would need Congress to pass something like that. But it's important to note, large institutional investors, and the biggest names are Invitation Homes, American Homes for Rent, and Progress Residential. It should be known they own less than 5% of all single-family rental homes in the U.S. They are concentrated in certain markets, which can push buyers out in those areas, but the vast majority of rental homes are owned by small to mid-sized landlords, mom-and-pop shops. But again, you can see those stocks are taking a huge hit on that, Kelly.
Yeah, down 5-6%. So, Diana, this was a post on Truth Social, so
Yes.
we'll wait more detail. I imagine, private equity obviously has a huge component of this, and they've had a lot of friendly policies from the administration, including things like changing who can access them, trying to get them into 401k plans and so forth. Nevertheless, this shows you the administration is doing anything it can. I'm sure it's had 30 different proposals for how it can lower housing prices. They've probably heard 50-year mortgage. We hear various reasons why that wouldn't make much of a difference. Build more supply. Well, I guess that's hard to do. Change the capital gains tax. Fine. They seem to be choosing, of all things, this one, and we'll see how much a difference that makes. But for these business
they're not necessarily
models,
choosing just this one, Kelly.
Right.
Look, they went after the builders in December, and you may remember that when he said that he was going to force the builders to build more homes, and he was calling them all to Washington to do that. And he did call many of the CEOs of the big public home builders. Their stocks took a hit as well on that. But then nothing came of it because they found, what could Fannie and Freddie, which is what he wanted them to do, what could they do to spur more home building? Not. They're in the mortgage market. So could you lower mortgage rates and get more demand, and that would help them build more homes? But again, it's all in the details. And right now, the details are very scarce. How would you get these large institutional investors to stop buying homes? It would take an act of Congress or something. But remember, these are very big companies with, very strong ties to the administration, especially when you talk about something like Blackstone,
Absolutely.
which owns single-family rentals.
Yeah, and by the way, we're showing shares of Rocket, Zillow, some of the mortgage companies higher. And I guess, Diana, what they perceive to be a potentially influx of retail demand into a market that, the institutions
I think that's
quote,
a stretch.
Quote had.
Yeah, I would say that's a stretch.
Well, we'll see. Nevertheless.
See, all of these things are enabled by the tax structure that Congress has exclusive authority to establish. The Fed, which they created almost 100 years ago, is supposed to advise them and is given massive leeway to impose the details. And what they're interested in is the top 5 to 3% of the economic spectrum of the country. Now, you take 5% of the population and you figure out who you're talking about, that 5% is a significant proportion of those who would be first-time homeowners or those who are first-time homeowners who want to upgrade. The interest rates are extraordinarily high right now, and they are not conducive to first-time homeowners getting into the market. When you cut down home ownership, you cut down residential integrity, community integrity. You foster up situations where people view themselves as being transitory to any community, except maybe housing projects or public housing, or something where it's not really desirous to be in, only as a stopgap, as part of a safety net situation. You see people who are put in situations of another sort where they become tremendously dependent upon being taken care of, and they start perceiving that as a reality, the real landscape of their world, and it is dysfunctional, and it causes us to be a society that claims victimhood, and forgets about the old phrase "can do."
Here's a question I want to ask you, because either around the time I was born or before I was born, someone told me at one point, I think it was the 70s or 80s, mortgage interest rates were at like 15% back in the day.
No.
That's what this was, someone who was of your generation.
I mean, my generation, we were kids. The first of us.
No. I'm talking about when you were a younger adult. So in the 70s. So
Yeah,
now
but I knew people that were
oh,
buying houses, and the interest rates weren't like that.
he said the highest at its peak. He said at its peak at one point it went up to 15%.
Well, since I was practicing law in the very early 1970s, no, that's not what I saw with my clients or even in the segment of the people I was dealing with, the poverty law situation. There were a lot of homeowners in those days. The housing was a lot more affordable, and the prices were
Oh, here
nowhere
we
near
go.
what
It
they are
says
now.
the U.S. had its highest mortgage rates in 1981 with the average 30-year fixed rate peaking.
1981, yeah, that's the
Yeah,
first year of the Reagan administration.
listen, let me finish. It said peaking at 16.6% annually and even hitting a staggering weekly high of around 18% in October of that year,
Yes,
driven by high inflation and Federal Reserve action. So that's what I'm saying. That so I was right around late. There was 81. I
that
was
wasn't
excited.
that. See, what you're talking about is a different kind of time period. That's the second year of the Reagan era.
Right.
I know, for example, and you have to factor in inflation, 1979 and 1980, after taxes, I brought in about 85,000. All right.
Back then.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's
Now,
a lot.
that wasn't bad. Now, 1981, 82,
Mhm.
my income was 26,000 before taxes because all my clients were going flat broke. They were staying in brother-in-law's trailer home that they were renting out. Everybody was losing their jobs, and that's when we first started seeing homeless people out on the streets. I remember I went to Philadelphia in 1981, and the temperature is like 22 degrees, and I'm shocked at all of these people sleeping out on the vents from the tall buildings downtown Philly or downstairs where they were trying to sleep near the underground rail station where there was some warmth. And I'm astonished, like, what's going on here? And I was talking to some people that were senior to me that said, we haven't seen anything like this since the Great Depression.
Right.
I remember I was 11 years old and I remember
Yeah,
seeing stuff
it
like
it
this.
was a lot of homelessness in the 80s. The 80s,
Yes, that's when it started. And
it
in
was
the
just 22.
70s,
But
in the
let me
70s,
say this.
never saw that.
Well,
And then in 1981, it's like, wow, what happened?
but I saw two tiers because there were a certain group of people who did very well, and then you just saw another group, no matter what background, just
Let me
financially.
tell you how bad it was that I can tell you about personally. I got enraged and pissed off when I discovered that my lowly self was paying more money to the federal government, not as a percentage, but in actual dollars than Boeing aircraft was. I said, whoa. And I started asking around and I started passing stuff out. I said, look at this. They not only did not pay any taxes, they got benefits that they sold for increased profitability. Hell, you and me both paid more than North American Rockwell, than Boeing, then IBM, which was the big thing back then, International Business Machines. See, we were paying you, if you had been as old as we were, you would have paid more than Ford Motor Company. Now, that is a
That's
damn
still going
shame.
on now. That's still going on
That's
now.
why we're in a mess right now. Tricky Dick Nixon established a rapprochement with the People's Republic of China. And during the Reagan administration, to make ends meet under this ridiculous tax scheme, voodoo economics, as George Herbert Walker Bush had the decency to call it, we started borrowing money from the People's Republic of China. We owe almost 30 some trillion dollars to the People's Republic of China. And under the Obama administration, the solution was to borrow more from them. So I'll give Bill Clinton this. It dropped under his administration and it picked back up. And then during what we have here, the Obama administration, it dropped drastically under Trump. And then with the hoe and the Joe, or the Joe in the hoe, it went back up. So we talk about see, the ignorant enthusiast starts talking about we have to ban China from owning property in America and all of this. Well, they get it because they got it as collateral, loaning the money to our federal government. Because in the 1980s, we essentially went underwater because, as I said, the average American middle class person was paying more in taxes than the biggest corporate entities in the country, literally, not percentage wise, but in actual dollars. So, what do you think we did to make up for that shortfall of income when you had all of that other mess going on around the world, where we had bin Laden brought in and befriended and taking the nuclear weapons plans and delivering them to Pakistan? And then the missiles and the money split with the Iran Contra scandal, where Congress said we are not to aid them, but that administration sold almost 4,600 or 700, 4,700 Stinger missiles. The Taliban got them. There are about 2,800 of them unaccounted for, and they're still all out around the world. And these things weigh like 15 pounds, 20 pounds, and somebody just stands there off of a runway anywhere in America, wait till he gets a buzz tone and pulls the trigger, and there's a downed aircraft. So, I mean, we have this, and now you have people with the opportunity to bring 45-year later improvements across the border when these idiots, Joe in the hole, opened up the southern border to Al Qaeda, Hamas, ISIS, and all of the people that hate us, Iran, North Korea, and all of the rest of them. And we have them sitting here ready to flip the switch. And nobody seems to be worried about it.
Right. I mean, I think Trump, he's trying to, because the banks and the credit card companies and the mortgage company, they're upset with him, but it's like he's trying to do right by American people. It's so much he can do. He can't just take a wand and undo the last 50 years of corporate takeover, basically. However, I do see him, and this is just his first year, literally his first year, trying to keep his campaign promise, like most presidents don't, and give the American people some type of relief. Honestly, I think he should extend the credit card cap at least for his whole presidency. But it's a start, even with the preventing these corporations, because they say, these corporations like Blackstone only own 5%. Well, that 5%,
you own 5% of the American economy, you doing pretty damn well.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. So 5% looks like a small number, but it's not. And even if it's small, what they're doing is, even you're coming in like I said, when they're buying these homes, they're upping the rent, which increases the rent for that city, for that area. So just because, it's only 5% that they're buying nationwide, wherever they buy at, the rent increase for everyone in that city.
Okay, let me give you a bigger example so people get the idea. Okay, they've got Sheridan Inn downtown Memphis, all right? Sheridan is an international corporate entity, right? Why in the hell does the city of Memphis need to finance to the tune of $220 million of taxpayers' money to rebuild the downtown Sheridan? $220 million. The company was advertising an 18.7% minority set aside. The crooked mayor they have, Paul Young, and his entourage, and the previous one they knew as the popping fresh doughboy, the previous mayor, they got arguably $8.6 million as their cut, and they're only advertising that it's a 15% set aside, which, aside from it being DEI, is compounded by the fact that the city is now, after putting $220 million into renovating the damn thing, going to buy it from the Sheraton hotel chain for $250 million. And then the scam is to rent it back to the Sheraton for $1 a year after we've put almost $500 million in there inside of 3 years. You know how bad the streets are around here. The potholes are ruinous. Crime is out of control. The schools have gone to hell. What little money they have left on the table is being corrupted by folk running similar scandals. And then that means that the folk that are pushing this nonsense get it back under the table. They've already got allegedly $8.6 million. Next thing that happens is you do stuff like divest your city entities of their resources, so you have to subcontract it out to private entities. We talked about our utility company around here. Across the street, the fees to clear 1 square mile of debris run from about $2,100 for the square mile to somewhere up around 4,600, 4,800. Some sources say the highest might be 7,000. But we contracted here with 3 private entities to pay not 2,100, not 4,200, but 24,600 per square mile to take down debris that interferes with power lines. So what did we come up with? A newly developed scandal that's come up in the last month and a half, where the current mayor and the previous one, the poppin' fresh doughboy, aka Strickland, they are implicated in $110 million worth of ripoff of the public funds. And see, how does that get financed? That goes to these banks that are dealing with financing the acquisition of all of these housing opportunities, so that single family homes are bought up by these large scale investors / sharks, and you cut out the shelter part of the food, clothing, and shelter triumphant that governments are supposed to deliver to their citizenry. It's a big scandal, and nobody wants to pay the slightest attention because they're watching celebrity gossip bullshit.
You give these
Like
people,
they got some actress with a enhanced, already fat ass up there, half naked, and you're supposed to be paying attention to that, not the fact that you can't even find a place where you could have sex without paying somebody rent on the place.
you give people nicknames, you be forgetting their real names.
I don't forget I do that. So was I talking about you?
Right.
Oh, you feeling guilty,
Well,
huh?
one last thing on this mortgage thing that I want to just bring up before we move on to the next topics. Because somebody put in the chat communism. What Trump is doing, lowering the interest rates and not allowing these institutions from buying up these regular single homes, he's trying to, I look at it, trying to stop communism, trying to stop from everything being owned by just one entity, right? And we're just renting or, getting subsidiary. Instead, he wants to put capital back into the American people's hands. Capitalism, owning a home.
Look. It looks like communism, but that's not really what it is. Get over it and upgrade your knowledge. Comrade Lenin wrote in 1919 a long paper saying communism is a corrective. By the last decade of the 20th century, in 1990, Russia will no longer need communism. It will be able to undergo what he called glasnost and perestroika, which are the exact same words that Chairman Gorbachev used in 1990. Communism is dead. The People's Republic of China operates internally on a communist basis, but internationally on an advanced capitalist base. By the way, they stabilize all of the world stock exchanges, and every cent of everybody's currency is stabilized by the People's Republic of China. They say the world runs on a capitalistic basis, and we cannot afford this whole place to crash on a Great Depression, a massive monster new depression, because it'll hurt us too. So we stabilize these markets. So when you don't control these sharks that are lurking out there to eat up the public and everything crashes, we get impacted too, because nobody can escape from this house now. The world is too small. The next thing that's going on is we don't get it, that we get all the time distracted by this nonsense, so we don't even have a clue. We don't know how to, our children, the youth don't know how to write longhand, so they got to print out everything slowly. All of them haven't taken speed typing, and they don't do like they do in the movies at 150 words a minute on a keyboard. They don't know how to listen because they got to have their damn music and everything's sneaking up on them. I used to represent way back when they first started doing that boombox thing. I had a well, I'll get off real quick. I had a category of robbers, armed robbers. Man, Lord, man, I like them folk like their music, man. They be listening to that music, don't hear me sneaking, man. All right, man, you want to listen to this? It's real loud. Oh, stick 'em up, fool. Let it hit the ground. It's going down. See, so you get your ear out of those phones and pay attention to what the hell's going on around you and quit going for this BS they're running up under your behind. There is a constipated nation that needs a laxative and an enema, and somebody's trying to give it. And when that guy gives it, what comes out is brown, it smells like hell, and it's nasty. But you got to get it out of you because it stays in there and festers and you'll get sicker. Our system is bad. Now, let's get